Your nervous system filters your reality down to a single, manageable hum. But what if you could manually tune the filter? We often accept pain as just damage, a fixed consequence of injury. Instead, research into central sensitization shows that our perception of noxious stimuli is not set in stone. It is actively tuned by how the brain processes incoming signals from your body. Think of your nervous system like a radio dial. Sometimes the signal is too loud and distorted due to inflammation or stress, causing everything minor to sound catastrophic, as documented in studies on somatosensory cortex function. We can shift that gain control endogenously. This is not just managing symptoms. It is learning how modulation through mechanisms like vagal nerve feedback alters your basic threshold for feeling things, turning subjective pain into a controllable input setting. The real mechanism behind this tuning is a dialogue between your internal state and incoming sensation itself. It is not simply about relaxing. It is about giving your body intelligence back. Research on vagal tone variability, specifically studies published regarding heart rate variability, shows that when the nervous system maintains balance, those input thresholds actually rise naturally. Your brain begins to treat intense stimuli not as a crisis signal, but perhaps just like background noise that needs filtering, a form of sensory sovereignty. Think of it like upgrading your internal operating system from Windows XP to something far more robust. You gain automatic error correction for distress signals. This capacity allows the body itself, through somatic resonance, to govern its own sensitivity. The capacity for somatic resonance to govern its own sensitivity is astonishing because it means we can actively modulate the very quality of sensation entering our minds. This is not just adjusting volume on a radio, it is rewiring the signal itself at the source. We are talking about modulation of primary afferent threshold firing through focused internal practice. Research into vagal nerve stimulation and pain modulation highlights that by influencing those input thresholds, we can fundamentally redefine what constitutes pain. Think of it as changing your body's default operating voltage, raising the bar so minor stressors do not trigger catastrophic feedback loops anymore. This suggests an unprecedented degree of sensory sovereignty over perceived reality, which means something nobody expected for complex chronic conditions, a self-tuning internal filter capable of rewriting neurological distress signals entirely. So if our body can rewrite distress signals entirely, how does it actually happen at a physical level? It is not just willpower. It is endogenous chemistry. We are talking about central gain control, the nervous system actively regulating the excitability of its gatekeepers in the dorsal horn, the spinal cord's initial sensory filter. Researchers have consistently found that this threshold tuning relies heavily on neuromodulators like GABA and serotonin systems. Imagine these chemicals as tiny volume knobs placed right where incoming signals cross paths. A 2023 Nature study showed how regulating those specific neurotransmitter pathways can fundamentally suppress unwanted pain signal amplification at the source. But here is the twist. While some experts argue that this gain control capacity requires permanent structural change, others maintain it is merely a temporary state of heightened cortical awareness. How do we know which one holds true? This raises the critical question about whether our internal tuning ability can be trained or if it is simply inherited wiring. The distinction between innate wiring and trainable plasticity is not necessarily an either-or situation. The research suggests that while our default settings have a genetic bias, the for shifting those thresholds is incredibly responsive to input quality. Think of it like this. Your body has inherited software limitations, but also comes pre-installed with incredible patch notes if you know where and how to apply them. We are looking at somatic resonance, doing more than just buffering signals. We are activating specific efferent feedback loops, signals sent from the brain that tell those primary afferent sensors exactly what volume they should be transmitting back in. This means our internal state does not just manage pain, it actively dictates its physical parameters. But how does this self-referential dialogue initiate a sustained change? What triggers the ultimate recalibration of your sensory filter? The true magnitude of this process is not just modulation. It is translation. We are seeing how our deep internal states act upon the very physics of sensation itself. Think about your senses not just as inputs, but as a language. And right now, inflammation or stress has introduced static that corrupts that syntax entirely. Research on vagal nerve stimulation and pain modulation shows this system can fundamentally rewrite those sensory rules at their most basic level, the afferent firing threshold. We are talking about reprogramming how your body speaks to itself, raising the bar so drastically that chronic distress signals become obsolete data. But here is where it gets strange. If our internal dialogue dictates physical input parameters, what exactly must change internally before the system allows this complete sensory reset? So what is required for this complete sensory reset? It means moving beyond merely enduring symptoms and learning how to intentionally guide your body's operating system through autonomic balance. This capacity, known as sensory sovereignty, does not wait for injury. It can be actively calibrated by the focused engagement of internal signals, a refined version of somatic resonance in action. The key takeaway is this: you do not have to accept static as permanent data. By cultivating deep self-awareness into your body's subtle input patterns, you are essentially learning how to manually turn up or down the gain control on that fundamental afferent signal. This practice grants a new form of presence. You become less reactive and far more resilient within reality itself. The full research archive is at jmtomasofficial.com. So let us pull back from the mechanics for one final truth. This entire exploration shows us that your body is not a passive victim of external stress. It is an incredibly sophisticated signaling machine capable of self-correction at its deepest level. You have learned how to influence those afferent signals, giving you genuine sensory sovereignty over distress itself. The practical application of this modulation begins with deliberate attention, not just observing discomfort, but actively seeking the subtle moments where your internal balance shifts. That microsecond pause before a feeling spirals? That is your gain control knob in action. Training that moment allows your nervous system to choose a higher threshold for input, fundamentally rewriting how you experience reality from inside out. This ability does not require radical change. It requires intentional calibration every single day. The full research archive is at jmtomasofficial.com.